Welcome to the Cincinnati Asian Art Society's October 29th, 2023 program. I'm Helen Rinsberg, President of the Society. Today's presentation is co-sponsored by the Cincinnati Book Art Society. Our program is How I Met the Marbling Muse on the Road to Immortality. Our distinguished presenter is Diane Maurer, artist and author. Her career has been colorful in many ways. In Diane's presentation, she'll tell the story of how teaching, demonstrating, and writing books about decorative paper, including Japanese Suminagashi marbling, grew out of her career as a paper artist. In the 1970s, she worked as a fiber artist, creating art for Philadelphia decorators. She had just published a book titled Fiber Arts when she helped someone with his writing project, and it took her on a new path as a paper artist. Since then, Diane has developed and perfected her art. She demonstrates her creative marbling and dyeing techniques at the Renwick Gallery at the Smithsonian Art Museum and for Martha Stewart. In 2018, the Metropolitan Museum of Art invited her to be a legacy group of distinguished paper artists. 40 of her marbled and painted papers were acquired by the Met, including her biographical story and ephemera relating to her career. It was then exhibited at the famed Grolier Club in New York and became part of Pattern and Flow, the golden age of American decorative papers, 1960s to 2000s, published by the Met. Yesterday, Diane led a great Suminagashi marbling and orizomegami fold and dye workshop for members of the Cincinnati Book Art Society and the Cincinnati Asian Art Society. Now, at the conclusion of today's presentation, you will enjoy Diane's demonstration of Suminagashi techniques. So, I'm turning it over to Diane.
All righty, thank you. Thanks, everybody. I never meant to become a paper marbler. In the 70s, I was working as a fiber artist and a writer. I was, as you heard, doing decorative paper, decorative techniques in fiber. I was doing macrame wall hangings and fiber sculpture, a lot of masks. I did masks, animal masks, African-looking masks, and macrame lampshades. They were really big. And I was doing those for Philadelphia decorators. I had written a book called Fiber Art for Chilton Book Company and really felt like I was meant to decorate paper with words, not paint, and hope to be a novelist one day and achieve a kind of immortality. Okay. Then I met and married Paul Maurer. He was a calligrapher and graphic artist that had taken a bookbinding course and learned a little bit about marbling in that course. He marbled paper from time to time, and I found the whole process fascinating, but I was content to just watch. I felt I was, again, meant to decorate paper with words, not paint. Marbling was a bit of an annoyance, really. I'd awaken in the middle of the night to hear my nocturnal husband at the marbling tank again. Water would be splashing into a bucket when he was rinsing his papers, or the blender and the kitchen counter was covered in a gelatinous substance that looked like something from a science fiction movie. That was the marbling size. Then there were the pungent odors of ox gall and a decaying marbling size that gave our whole house a kind of a combined fish market barnyard smell. Okay. When Paul began teaching marbling workshops and asked for my help writing a booklet for his students, my interest overtook my irritations. I was looking for a topic for another book, and a search of titles convinced me that except for some really sketchy magazine articles and a few rare books, there was very little written about marbling. That's when I decided to put the great American novel on hold and write another craft book. Paul did his best to impart his knowledge, but the craft Paul described had so many variables it didn't make sense. Watercolor marbling, There's one of my favorite papers. Sounded impossibly complicated. It is complex, but if you pay attention, you can master it. I wondered if Paul was exaggerating the difficulties. I wanted to write clear instruction without a bunch of asides about how to modify size and colors for temperature changes and humidity changes, impending mold, or a visit from an ornery marbling muse. Clearly, it was time to roll up my sleeves and get some first-hand knowledge. I started working with Paul's set of primary colors to get a feel for the brushes, whisks, and combs used in watercolor marbling. I didn't like the colors. He was using mostly primary colors, but I was itching to get back to my typewriter. I persevered anyway. It wasn't until one evening when I was too tired to act the professional that I really relaxed enough to let marbling seduce me and really change my life. I began to play at the marbling tank, adding white to the colors to mute them. Then I mixed colors with each other to create new hues. I was smitten. It was also immediate, unlike my other pursuits. Paul and I produced a very successful booklet in '84 titled An Introduction to Carrageenan and Watercolor Marbling. I took care of the writing, and Paul did the graphics. We were both marbling by now, and the large 5x7-inch tip-ins we produced, one of which appeared through that circular opening in the cover, made it very collectible. It also made it time-consuming to produce. And before long, we had to raise the price from $7.50 to a whopping $10.50. Apologies came in the form of a drawing of a shirtless character peeking up from the bottom of a postcard, explaining that we were losing our shirts and pants at the old price. Okay. I was still searching for a publisher for a much larger book, though, and shopped a manuscript to Watson Guptill, whom I really wanted to work with. They turned me down, regretting it later, saying the subject was too obscure. I found 2 other publishers wanting to work with us, but one insisted we stop publishing our little booklet. That was not okay. The other started backing away from promises of lots of color, and I went to legal aid for artists to get out of the contract. So I sat on an almost completed manuscript for several years. In the meantime, on a whim, I decided to do a book of poems about dinosaurs' eating habits. Paul did the graphic illustration by collaging our marbling, while I did the writing. Dinosaurs Dining was a hit in sepia inks on an appropriately toothy cover stock because we couldn't afford full-color printing. Nevertheless, it sold well in museum shops and aquariums and introduced marbling to lots of children and their parents. And that paper in the background is a little busy for there, but that is the Godiva paper that I'm going to mention a little bit later. By now, our little marbling booklet had made it beyond Paul's workshops to art supply stores in New York City, where it was noticed by Shigeo Matsui, who contacted me and asked if I would look over the English translation of the Japanese instruction for his company's product, Boko Ondo Marbling Colors. He sent me the text and samples of his product for what was to become a whole new kind of marbling to me, Japanese Suminagashi. Okay. That is a double image piece, which I pretty much specialize in, but it might look different than what you know as traditional Suminagashi. Unlike the watercolor marbling I'd been doing on a Carrageenan marbling size, Suminagashi was done on just plain water, with a minimum of equipment, just a Japanese hand fan. I wondered about the history of the craft and learned that it predated Turkish marbling, or Ebru, and probably began in about the 12th century. It may be before that. Some say the 10th century. Very little is known about the history of the craft that produces delicate swirled images and jagged patterns. According to Japanese legend, knowledge of the craft was given to a man named Jiomon Hiroba to reward him for his devotion at the Kasuga Shrine. Historians, however, think that an ancient Japanese game contained the germ of the idea, and that Hiroba probably expanded on it. A favorite pastime of the 12th century royal court was to decorate paper with sumi ink drawings and then immerse the paper in vats of water. Once the paper was submerged, the inks would float to the surface of the water and produce a fleeting yet entertaining image. Whether credit for the idea of marbling is due to the gods or to Hiroba's ability to take game playing a step further, it appears that Hiroba was one of the first to apply paper to a floating image to capture and preserve it. It is said that he traveled the land in search of the best water for making papers. When he arrived in Ichizen City, where he found water to be perfect for making Suminagashi, he settled there. The family continues the tradition to this day, where 55 generations, isn't that amazing, continue to make this form of paper. They've been doing it since 1151 AD. Okay. I immediately loved Suminagashi and my new friend, who generously funded many trips for me to demonstrate the craft on television shows around the country, like the Carol Duvall Show and Home Matters. Although Suminagashi can be done by grinding stick inks to make colors, I always was pleased with the results achieved with the Boku colors and continue to use them today. The marbling booklet, showcased in several storefronts in the 80s, was also noticed by Crescent Books. The publishers inquired about creating a book for them, and I responded with my finished manuscript. Marbling, a complete guide to producing beautiful patterned papers and fabrics, also dealing with Suminagashi now, was published in 1991. After that, I was fortunate and the publishers came to me. Decorative Paper was published by BDD Illustrated Books in 1993, and Little Brown and Company published a book for children containing reproductions of my marbled papers called Make Your Own Spectacular Valentines in 1995. About this time, I started producing my little set of hand-bound accordion fold books. Making paste papers, Suminagashi marbling. In fact, I'm still making them, and we have some over there on that table you may have seen. They have little tip-ins inside. Anyway, making paste papers, Suminagashi marbling, and making fold and die papers were the little books I created. Decorative paper was flourishing now, and I had several sales reps who showed my paper at the New York stationery and gift shows. They took orders from museum shops throughout the U.S. who ordered my little hand-bound books in lots of dozens at a time. They also ordered my paper jewelry and marbled notes in lots of several dozen at a time. Business was so good that I remember being overwhelmed one day when an order came in for another darn marbled guest book that I was sick of making. I was just about in tears when the person that was helping me that day said, "You know what? You're the boss. You don't ever have to do another one if you don't want to do them." So I didn't. I have never made another one. Stopped that day. Okay. The next photo, and it's okay to laugh here, shows you how crazy things got as I tried with my daughter's help to keep up with orders. As you can see, Rufus the cat in the box there, well, he could take it, but Charlie Dog had had enough and decided to get the heck out of the mess. We persevered, and I eventually got more help to complete orders on time. I also eventually got a better studio space. Okay. In 1996, a friend attending a book convention was asked by Watson Guptill if she knew of anyone who would be interested in writing a book about paper art. When she recommended me, yay, my writing career really took off. Paper Art was published in 1997, Like my previous books, the work contained chapters on traditional watercolor marbling, Suminagashi marbling, paste paper design, and fold and die techniques. I loved my editors, and they loved me. And in 1999, they published the work I'm most proud of, the Ultimate Marbling Handbook. The editors were aghast when told they had turned down the title years before as being too obscure. They waited patiently with me for Marbling a Complete Guide to go out of print so they could publish the Ultimate Marbling Handbook. I'm thrilled to say that it has an international reputation as the Marbler's Bible. Because I now had access to the internet, I was able to present the work of marblers worldwide who covered paper and other surfaces in unconventional designs, as well as Suminagashi and classical 15th century designs. Oil color, watercolor, acrylic, and Suminagashi marbling techniques were all represented. The book did well throughout the world, and I was happily surprised when told one day that it was showcased at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. When the book went out of print, I retained the rights, and in 2014 found a great printer who helps me keep it available in hardcover today at dianemaurer.com. The lettering is crisp, and every photo is exact. So I was really so glad to find them. In 2000, Watson Guptill published Art of the Scrapbook, really about creative bookbinding with decorative papers, but scrapbooking was the buzzword that year. That book won the New York Public Library Award for Best Craft Book for Young Adults. My editors, friends by now, came to the awards ceremony. Each time I completed a book, my editors said, "So, what's your next book?" When I suggested the art of making paste papers, they hesitated and asked what that was. When I explained that it was a bit like sophisticated finger painting, they were interested, but because I wanted to include calligraphy on paste papers in a book that was sold internationally, they were concerned about language barriers. When I reminded my editors of the obscure marbling book they had turned down years before, all hesitation disappeared. The Art of Making Paste Papers was published in 2002, filled with work and technique from paste paper designers around the world. It is also still in print, republished in 2020 by Word-Bound Media. The internet was a huge help once again, letting me look at websites and JPEGs of work submitted. I wrote 4 more books with chapters on decorative paper, including Suminagashi marbling in the 2000s. The Handcrafted Letter was published by Storybooks in 2001. Although the title makes it sound like a calligraphy book, it was to be Story's blockbuster book about the art of letter writing. Unfortunately, that was also the year when email hit the scene and handwritten letters rapidly fell out of favor. Watson Guptill also published 3 more of my books, The Art and Craft of Handmade Cards in 2003, Paper in 3 Dimensions in 2006, and Collage, Assemblage, and Altered Art in 2007. In addition to writing books and producing craft in the 90s and 2000s, I was also teaching marbling workshops throughout the country, both as one-day workshops and as week-long workshops at art and paper-making schools like Penland and Aramont. And interest in marbling was increasing exponentially at this point, and many of my students that I taught turned around and taught their own workshops. My 4th grade students loved Suminagashi and making the tsunami waves while working in a tray of water. Especially the boys did this, and they had to be controlled. They also loved the lessons on Japanese origami or fold and die techniques and produced some gorgeous papers. Helen, there we go. So yeah, this is 4th grade work. We did a lot of that yesterday, and you can see they did pretty well. Yeah. My books gave me credentials and opened doors for opportunities to demonstrate marbling and paste paper design. When the Smithsonian Institution hosted a book arts show, I was asked to demonstrate watercolor marbling in the Renwick Gallery. I was honored, but pretty nervous about keeping paint splatters off the art and furnishings. Yeah. Very imposing guards were standing by, and there were several signs saying, "No photos." Well, the guards were soon captivated by the marbling. They became quite friendly. They not only allowed the photos, they even offered to change the temperature and the humidity of the gallery to give me the best marbling environment. It was great. I was also asked to demonstrate Suminagashi and paste paper design at Kate's Papery. This was a wonderful, were you there? Yeah. It was a wonderful paper and stationery store in New York City. Sadly, I think it closed down this year. I don't think it's there anymore.
One of them closed down a while ago.
Oh, really? Yeah. I guess the big one in New York just recently. I was turning down that opportunity because I was knee-deep in orders for my paper art until the phone contact said she was a talent scout for Martha Stewart, and was I interested if she sweetened the deal with an invitation to be on Martha Stewart Living. I was. So I did my stint in New York at Kate's and then took a very fun trip to Connecticut to teach Martha to do Suminagashi marbling on television. Okay. And she only had to do 3 takes to get Suminagashi right. They weren't worried about the film they were wasting at that time. It was just like, keep on going until she gets it right. Okay. And then I taught her to do Suminagashi, a Suminagashi technique with a kitty whisker brush. This is just a cat whisker taped to the end of a chopstick that I had invented. Okay. I had done other TV shows, but not with the resulting publicity that this show offered. There was always an uptick in orders for my marbling supply business after that show aired. Yes, I did that too. The demonstrations were always fun, and people in the 90s were captivated by witnessing an art form that they had never seen before. I remember one demo I did for a publishing convention where a group of Asian men came over to watch me build the concentric rings for a Suminagashi design. I began using the kitty whisker brush to gently pattern the rings and held it up for them to see the whisker. I should have it with me now. It became clear that they did not understand what I was using and didn't understand my English description. That is until I meowed for them. I did, I meowed. Here is Finnegan, my current whisker donor, misbehaving at my open house by relaxing on the Suminagashi marbled silk scarves. When I looked for someone to show my work in New York at Surtex, a very expensive place to market designs for packaging art to the world, I contacted a graphic design studio that I knew attended the show and asked if they would represent me. Sending them my marbling book with examples of my work was a great help. It assured them of the quality of my work and resulted in a relationship that brought opportunities to sell my work to companies like Godiva Chocolates. That was the Godiva paper behind the dinosaurs. Okay. Lenox China, cosmetic and pharmaceutical companies, and others. I continue to teach and demonstrate marbling today. The next photos are from a recent presentation of Suminagashi marbling for the Bellefonte Art Museum. The first image shows applying the colors in the traditional concentric ring design. The rings of color were then moved with a hand fan before applying an absorbent paper. The sheet is printed as soon as it makes contact with the color. The finished sheet is then hung to dry. Japanese Suminagashi masters like Koichi Yamada, shown here, photographed in Kyoto, Japan in 1983, worked primarily in red, black, and indigo colors. Western artists today use any number of colors. Black or gray Suminagashi, though, as shown on this silk scarf I marbled, can be effective when the play of tight and loose meandering lines becomes the focus of a design. I continue to create marbled and paste paper products today, including the 3-book set of accordion books that I produced decades ago. These have been joined by accordion fold animal stories, covered in original decorative papers, and artist books with miniature versions of the collage art I now concentrate on. I continue to use these. I often use my Suminagashi papers to depict ocean waves by cutting around the designs formed by fanning the floating colors. Okay. Other collage materials are created by cutting along the curved lines of centuries-old classical marble designs to release hidden botanical forms. These cutouts can suggest wild daylily leaves or aquatic plants like those pictured in Mermaid's Garden 2. I use my origami papers in my collages too, to present a fanciful sunrise or stained glass as in Chapel Garden. I never did write the novel I had planned, but I did write a number of books. And the immortality? I think I came close when in 2018 the Metropolitan Museum of Art invited me to be part of the decorative paper legacy project. They purchased 40 of my marbled and paste-painted papers to be permanently preserved there. This is a photo taken at the Met on the day I delivered my decorative papers to the Met's preservation librarian, Mindel Dubansky. I returned in March of 2023 to give an illustrated talk about my life and work as a marbler, writer, and paper artist. That's it. So, are there any questions before we move on to a demo?
Okay.
No questions?
Joan, you look like your hand is ready to go. No. Okay.
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 What's the difference between marbling and Suminagashi?
Well, Suminagashi is a type of marbling. Okay, so it is marbling.
What distinguishes it
Oh
from
my
others?
gosh, it's done on just plain water instead of having to mix up a marbling size of carrageenan moss. So the colors are just floating on water instead of having to add ox gall to your colors to make them float. You're using photo flow here. In ancient times they used pine resin. It's kind of like a soap to have the colors spread out so they could float on just plain water. And
Oh, I know from the photography business.
oh, that's
Actually,
right.
yeah.
Yes, it's a print drawing chemical,
I
isn't
know
it?
for film. It keeps from getting water spots on the film
Okay.
as it dries.
Okay.
Flow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Lots of things. With traditional marbling, you can use combs and rakes and manipulate the colors. With Suminagashi, things are all just barely floating, barely buoyant. So when you come in, you can use something like the kitty whisker brush. Just a single whisker going through the colors will move the colors slightly, but not enough to create a wake and sink your colors. Yeah, lots of differences. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Whatever happened to your husband's
Oh.
career?
Okay, now
Well,
I need to repeat
no.
questions for the video.
Oh,
So, what
okay.
happened to your husband?
Okay, well, I wasn't sure if I should say this, but back remember when Crescent Books came to me and they wanted to know would I produce a marbling booklet for them? I was just talking about this at lunchtime. Should I say it or not? So in my talk, I said I responded to them by giving them my manuscript. And then the next line would be, and Paul responded by moving to New Mexico. So, yeah, he knew it was about to get really crazy, really busy, lots of hard work, and he was not into it. So he took off, and I continued. We're great friends today. Got a postcard yesterday, phone call last week. And he still does some calligraphy. He does some artist books. So he's happy, but he's disconnected, doesn't want anything to do with the internet, with any phone calls, or, he's just happy just being and creating his art. So,
Okay.
yeah,
All right.
worked out okay, worked out just fine.
All right.
Yes.
Back in the back.
Yeah, you talked about the 70s as being in the 80s, sort of the heyday of
Oh,
decorative
yeah,
art.
yeah.
And I'm curious about, having been in this field for this long, kind of just your sense of the evolution and your sense of it now and what you see on the horizon.
Okay. So I want to repeat the question because of Diane's great experience. Would she tell us sort of the evolution of the art form?
No, I'm more interested in, so it had its heyday. Where are we now, and what's the arc of where we're going?
Okay. Where are we now, and where is the arc of where we're going with decorative papers? Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, I can't speak to that as an expert about it, really. My feeling is that during its heyday, there was a whole lot of bad marbling out there. I can remember seeing note cards produced by Gibson that I just wanted to go, oh my God. Can't you see the dust spots? Can't you see the shift marks there? That is not part of marbling. And framers were also purchasing papers that were a mess. They were not good. But it was like anything goes. Wow, it's marbling. So I think now when it's used, people are more discerning about and more knowledgeable about what is good work and what isn't good work. The other thing is that it wasn't that hard to make a living at it back then. And then, with the internet and with, some of the Asian countries coming out with beautiful things, they had beautiful books. And people were buying those instead of buying the hand-bound things with the marbled paper. And marbled paper was being reproduced. And so I'm hopeful, that it's being recognized more as an art form now. And I hope that the book that the Met put out, Pattern and Flow, will also lead people to realize what good work looks like. So does that answer your question? Okay.
Okay. Now, another question
Just
over
another
here. Peg.
I just wondered, because you've had a lifetime of expertise, when you maybe had an order to do like multiple papers that looked enough alike that they would be in a series,
Yeah.
and how did you accomplish that? Like, especially with Suminagashi, when
Oh,
the
yeah.
water is not as easy as like a traditional marble where it'll stay put a little better.
Okay, so the question is, when you have a multiple order where things are supposed to be somewhat the same, how can you accomplish that when, well, actually the Suminagashi is so delicate in many ways. Is that okay, Peg?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I think Suminagashi would be impossible to recreate exactly. And people would just understand it will be a similar look, in exactly the same colors, but not exactly the same pattern. But I would like to go on to say that sending out an example of I did a lot of stuff for reproduction rights to different manufacturers and book companies. And so they would see a sample of something, and then I would have to reproduce from that sample, and that could be really, really difficult. If it was like multiple colors, some of my papers had like maybe 10 different colors and shades in it, and you'd work really, really hard to get that together. But the monotony of some of it, I used to do these little book pins, and a librarian came to me once and said that there was going to be a convention of librarians, and they wanted 500 book pins in exactly the same papers, right? And it's like, oh, good grief. But when I did the Godiva paper, in order to get, in this country, the Godiva boxes were made and photographed. But that paper was used all over the world, and in many other countries, they took a big, big sheet of paper like this, photographically reproduced, but a big sheet of paper, and wrapped all the boxes of chocolates in it. So I had to create a huge piece of paper for them to photograph from to do this. So, and it was like, it's got to be perfect. You know, I just felt like it's got to be perfect. And I don't have really long arms, so I had a special plexiglass tray built, and this is how you had to do it. Okay, so you've got your big tray. My colors are all ready. I'm hoping no dust is going to fall, because if a little speck of dust falls, it breaks open the color, and then it's ruined. And I'm leaning over the tray like this, and I get this end down. If I do much as move like that, forms a streak and wrecks the paper. So I probably marbled at least 80 papers to get one perfect paper. So for that job, I had all these outtakes. I'm still making note cards with the Godiva papers.
I'll tell you what, why don't you go ahead and do the demonstration
Okay.
now?
Yeah.
And
So I just filled my tray with water. There's nothing else in it. It's just plain water. I sometimes joke that you could do Suminagashi in a mud puddle. So it's interesting to me that, you know, someone searched throughout the land to find exactly the right water. Now these colors, I carried these from Pennsylvania, so hopefully nothing happened to them along the way. All right, so we have our water in the tray, and then the first thing you need to do is what's called skimming. That is breaking the surface tension of the water so that your colors can spread and float. And even moving over water builds up this microscopic skin. So the first thing I'm doing is skimming. That's the first. It removes dust, cat hair, and anything else that might be on the tray. That's just a strip of newspaper. My colors over here are these Boko Undo marbling colors. They're still available everywhere, Amazon and various art supply stores. Look.
Oh, Boko Undo.
That's the one. You're a stinker.
You should tell them about the Martha Stewart story about
Oh.
the cat hair. I think that's
About which one?
the cat whisker.
Oh, well, I did. That she claimed to do it?
Yes.
Yeah, I know. Well, and this is what they look like. Okay? Okay, so these little color containers are great. Into each of those, I've put a single drop of the photo flow that we had mentioned before. And then also about a teaspoonful of color. And when you do this, you have to constantly stir this color before you apply it, because the photo flow tends to settle out, and the colors really need that to keep them up and floating. So I've been talking. I'm going to skim again. Make sure that skin did not begin to set up. Okay, down the length. And it's easy to do this with one brush in either hand, but after you've done it for a bit, you can do multiple brushes. Okay. And you can also see if you've had too much coffee, if your hands are shaking. And at first you don't see much happening, but as you build up the rings, you'll see more color appearing. I like to you can do it in any section of the tray, but I actually like to work in the center. Now this one is not cooperating exactly. Let's see, we'll stir this a little bit more.
Are those any particular kind of brushes? Are those calligraphy brushes?
These are number 4 bamboo brushes. I neglected to tell you that one of these color wells has just plain water with a single drop of photo flow in it. And that is this invisible color, I call it, that is creating the clear ring. And each color and the water with photo flow is helping to push the previous ring out and intensify the color a little bit. Okay, so maybe you'll see it kind of stops wanting to even move out for me. It's reached its maximum here. Okay. And then when you bring your brushes out, you have to wipe them against a paper towel, because while you are releasing color, what's coming up into the brush? Water. And then your colors get diluted, and then you go to apply them, and it's super pastel, and you wonder why. So, I should show you the whisker. Okay, so here's our kitty whisker. You can draw through the colors back and forth, approximate a nonpareil design. Some people really get into this. I don't. But you can do circles, and because and sometimes the cat whisker is like too long, and you just cut it back a little bit. But it's very easy to do. You can also blow from the side of the tray, but I love to use the fan. It has to be a Japanese fan, and that gives you all these really nice jagged lines. Can everybody see, or just come forward if you can't? Yeah. Okay, I have several packages of this. It's Speedball block printing paper, which was wonderful. It's not made anymore. Speedball is made, but they changed the formulation, and it doesn't work for Suminagashi anymore. But any kind of washi, absorbent paper should be tried. However, try a little piece of it before you buy a whole bunch of it, because I found this fabulous paper that had all vegetable matter in it. And I just thought this is going to be great. It was very expensive. I bought the whole roll. I cut off a piece, did my Suminagashi, and it was like toilet paper. It just fell apart. So, yeah, I always tell people to, try a bit beforehand. So I like to work by getting my fingers hooked over the edge of the tray. As I told students yesterday, you don't let go until both of your fingers are in the water. Because if you let go, you're going to drop it and get a streak going. Okay, so down, and then all at once, down, all the way down. There it is. I'll pick it up this way so you can see it. Okay. 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 We'll drift this over here. Now let me do one more, because, okay, then we just erase this. Yes?
Are you changing anything to do it on silk, or are you doing it?
No, exactly the same way. The only thing is, and I buy my silks from a place called Thai Silk, and I used to be able to order these scarves, and they were great, and I didn't have to do anything to them. The last batch I got, I had to alum. I had to treat them with a mordant. Otherwise, they didn't hold the color. So I don't know what is different. But thankfully, in traditional marbling, you have to coat your paper with an alum mordant before you marble it in order to get it to accept the color. So it's nice to be able to skip that step. Okay, so let me do one more, and I'll show you a double image. See if this green is going to behave now. Yeah, actually, you know what? Thanks for reminding me I need to skim again. So you can see it's behaving better now, and that was because it was not completely stirred up. That photo flow needs to be right throughout the color to keep it from sinking. Having too much color on your brush, or instead of just touching the tip of the brush to the top of the water, if you dunk it below, that also will make your color sink. So, give some more of that. Okay, we're going to stop there. Again, this wastes color, but it's better than wasting all the color by diluting it all. Okay. say on this again. I probably should have done more rings here to make it more dramatic, but I wanted to show you the difference between creating a single image, another blank sheet of paper. Okay. And I'm not sure what this is. These colors are probably not going to be great, but this was a previously marbled piece that has been dried. And then we'll just put this down on top. And you can see it doesn't want to absorb it quite as much since it's already got some color on it that it's resisting. And so here is the initial sheet. And then here is the double image. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So that's lots of fun to do.
Very.
Okay. And then, yeah. Make sure I'm dripping over here. Everybody see that? Okay. Okay, so Margaret insisted that I show you this show card. So I will do it. Woo! Okay. I'm just going to leave that on there for now. This is a show card from my classes, and this is Yoichi Kamada again, Yamada. But you can see how this is a double image design. If you do 3 images, it tends to get a little too busy. You can use the brush containing the clear solution, the water with the photo flow in it, to touch down and create wide openings in a pattern, kind of like a Marimekko design. This, I don't know if you can see that or not, but they're 2 different shades of green. I mixed those up and then touched down into one color on one side of the brush, the other color on the other side of the brush, so that then when I touched down, it released both shades at the same time. Okay. And this, working in a larger tray, you could do thick and thin areas. Okay.
How do you use it? By putting more pigment in an area than another?
Well, you hold your brush down longer, it releases more color, or you work very, very quickly, so it can hardly release any and do thinner lines. And you can do 3 different shades of a color next to each other and then interrupt that by the clear solution. There are all kinds of ways of doing it, and just one black and white, black and clear. Or this one is the ink spot, and I could never figure out how, if it got on there and went through to there, why didn't it go through there? Anyway, all kinds of things. Sometimes you can get cheap envelopes, like I said, that work just great. So you just try everything.
Diane, would you mind showing, like, she taught us a whole other technique,
Oh,
and she just has some finished examples that I think you all would appreciate.
Oh, sure.
too, where it's the fold and die.
okay. This is the fold and die technique. And this is done also with an absorbent paper, folding it in various ways, pleating it, really. And then putting dye on. Once again, the Boko Undo dyes work just perfectly for that. And then squeezing it into the bundle of paper. Anyway, so these are some examples. This is probably my favorite one, which is rather pastel, but really, it's very, very easy. Well, you saw the examples that the 4th graders did, so it's more of that. You're welcome to look through these or pass them around if you want to see them up close. Whatever you want to do is fine. Yeah, this is another one that's kind of interesting.
Is there any
Yeah.
kind of paper that you favor for folding?
Once again, the Japanese papers, the washi, are definitely the best to do that with. So that's basically it. Any other questions or? Yes.
The brushes that you use, the bamboo brushes, are those calligraphy brushes?
No, they can be used for sumi drawing.
Okay.
Yeah, but I don't
Do they
think,
have a animal hair?
I think it's squirrel. I hate to think about it, but some of them are camel. Yeah. And the whiskers, by the way, if you do that, I had a student ask me once, he said, well, how do you avoid getting scratched when you yank out a whisker? It's like, no. Cats lose them. Did you? You're the one? You're bad. No, they volunteer them. Yeah. So I knew I was going to be doing this. I knew I was going to be teaching this. And we had 16 students, and everybody needed a whisker brush. So I didn't have that many. I had like maybe 5 brushes with whiskers, and I didn't have any whiskers at that point. So I put an ad on Facebook, among my friends, and I said, if any, a lot of you have cats, you're cat people, could you send me some whiskers? I got to make some brushes for this course. And this one friend, Della Sperling, said, I have been saving my cat's whiskers for 40 years. And I went, oh no, in a jar that my mother had that her peach preserves were in. And I just thought, this is kind of kinky. But, but yeah, it was great. She sent me an envelope, and, it was enough to do the trick. So, yeah. yeah. No. So I guess, help yourself to look through things. Come up and look at these if you want to.
Now, for those of you that live in Cincinnati, Plaza Art Supply in Clifton, and I think they're still out in Kenwood. Yeah, they're closed downtown. Has a huge selection of washi. I don't know if they carry the inks, but they do carry the papers.
Yeah.
Have they? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. They also have a lot of already decorated papers that can be absolutely fabulous. Thanks, Diane, for a great presentation and a fabulous demonstration, as you can see by everyone crowded around you. Thank you to our audience, and we hope you continue to support our Cincinnati Asian art programs. Thank you to the Cincinnati Book Art Society, who are our co-sponsors today. See you next time. Bye-bye.